Welcome to the Thai Law Forum. Today I'm here with author David Young, who's based here in Thailand. David, thank you for joining us today on the show. First question that I have for you is, how did you get started in writing?
How did I get started in writing? I guess I'd have to go back to high school for that. I wasn't very good at sports. I couldn't fix cars very well. But you know, I still needed to find my niche. So I started to write, and I continued on through college, and it just sort of became my thing, I guess. It was very strange in that I really took to it. I really enjoyed this medium of expressing myself through writing, and it continued over into my adult life, and here I am.
Okay, so what about your first book? What inspired that?
Well, if we're talking about my first book here in Thailand, like I said, I got to Thailand not expecting to stay for as long as I have. But my first year here, there was just so much going on, so much for the senses that I really wanted to get this down in a book. And it wasn't just the beauty, but the horror and the comedy and the tragedy. And the nightlife of Bangkok seemed to be a very good encapsulation of all that wackiness that I could see going on around me. And that was sort of the inspiration for my journey into the writing the Thai novel, I guess, written by an expat.
Okay, and then so before you became a full-time author, what were you doing before all of this?
Not a whole heck of a lot. I had a lot of different jobs, with the writing always sort of overshadowing it. Like, I could be a coffee shop counter jerk or a video store clerk. I washed dishes in Leicester for 6 or 7 months, but it was always to try to gain more experience for the writing. And like I said, when I came to Thailand, I wasn't planning to settle down here, but it was just such an ideal opportunity to have the time to write and have the subject matter that both interested me and made me laugh and made me cry. It was just a kind of an all-in-one experience.
So why did you decide to come to Thailand?
On a whim. I had some friends who had come here before me, and they wrote me a letter saying, "Hey, it's great. There's jobs and there's beaches and lots of things to do," and I just followed them up on their invitation, and here I am, 15 years later.
Where's the best place for you personally to get inspiration for writing a book?
Best place to get me inspiration? I'll say the worst place for me is actually nature. I'm not a big fan of nature.
Okay.
Not a big fan of beaches or the sea or wide open spaces with the silence around me. I really enjoy the hustle and bustle of the city life, I guess. That's where the stories come to me. Saying that, I choose to live in a somewhat calmer environment.
Okay.
Outside of Bangkok.
Okay, and where would that be?
That is in Ayutthaya, which is about 70 kilometers north of Bangkok.
Okay, and how did you decide on settling there? Because I've been there, but it doesn't seem like it's a place a lot of people visit, but I don't think a lot of people decide to, hey, I'm going to settle down here. No,
and I think that's what's kept me here for so long, is that it's just quiet, and I can think I can get to the post office and do my shopping in 20 minutes and be home to do my writing, whereas in Bangkok, that might take me a couple of hours. Again, I did sort of just end up here. This was where the job was when I first came over. And I got to know the people. I started to learn Thai, and now I'm just sort of considered one of the locals. And it's a very comfortable existence. I do enjoy my forays into Bangkok, though.
And speaking of Bangkok, because you've got two books, one titled Sukhumvit Road, and then the other one is Khao. And so, for you personally, which place do you prefer to go to?
Personally, neither.
Neither, okay.
I almost feel too young for one place and too old for the other.
Okay.
Not saying I don't hold, an amount of love for both places in my heart, because they did certainly provide me with a lot of ideas and opportunities for stories that I certainly would not have had otherwise.
Okay, and because they're two very famous roads, so why did you decide to base two of your books on these places?
Again, they seem to be, I know every country has their own sort of version of those roads. So many different stories pass through these areas without ever really bothering to stop. It's sort of a purgatory for travelers, both of these spots in Bangkok, both of these roads. And I had so many characters running around my head all at once that I decided to bring them all together, tell their stories, intersect them, intertwine them, and I decided to make these roads the sort of focal point for all of these characters, so that their stories revolve around these roads and have to do with sort of what these roads represent at the same time. Khao being the crossroads of the world, traveling from one place to the other. Sukhumvit being, well, I shouldn't say Sukhumvit, specifically a certain area of Sukhumvit, being an area where romance is possible and dangerous and comical and tragical at the same time. There you go.
That explains it. So do you think it takes a certain mentality to be a writer here in Thailand?
You definitely need a sense of humor. I think if you don't, you're just going to be butting heads against every facet of Thai society.
Do you ever get together with any other authors, such as Christopher Moore, and kind of throw around ideas?
Books are journeys, and there's really, once you've started one, you are on that path by yourself from beginning to end. There's not, I guess, and while you're doing it, while you're sitting down at your computer or typewriter every day, it's really just you and the blank page. There's no going out for assistance, or I don't know. I've never found that throwing out ideas to other writers or my friends, it always seems to come back in a negative sense. Like I'd rather my stories played out on the page rather than with another person. I'd rather develop the characters by myself rather than have someone else sort of decide their fates. Sort of becomes too important to me. So maybe we're all just sort of too self-contained and too selfish in our own little worlds. Who knows?
And so for other people who are thinking about taking that same move that you did here to Thailand, what advice would you give them?
To keep in mind that the roles that people play here often become more important than the person themselves, whether that be an employee or a boyfriend or a husband. The role of that you fill is often overshadowed. It often overshadows your individual aspects, which goes back to what I was saying about maintaining a sense of humor. Because if you can't step back and laugh at yourself, and even have some little room you go into. I'm fortunate enough where I can just come to my computer and write. That keeps me intact here and sane in Thailand. But if you don't have that, I think it's pretty easy to just sort of fly off into a bad area, a bad place that you don't want to be to in Thailand. So my recommendation would be keep it light. Don't take it too seriously.
With your books, how close to reality are they?
Well, they're close to our reality. I won't say they're close to my reality.
Okay.
I do tend to venture off the cliff sometimes, and I realize that and have to reel myself in. But the wildest things that have happened in some of my books have actually been stories I've heard from people that have actually happened, but I put a little fictional spin on them, of course.
Do you have an example? Maybe something short you could tell us?
I remember in Chiang Mai, a man, this this actually appeared in my novel Fast Eddie's Lucky Seven. I remember a guy, it starts off like a bad joke. A guy walks into a bar, and he's all beat up, and I hear him I hear him talking to his friend, explaining what happened, and he spends the next hour or two crying into his beer, talking about a girl he met, and they went on a tour of the mountains or something, and at one point, she leapt off the back of his bike. She didn't fall off, she actually just jumped off. Oh. And she hurt herself pretty badly. Mm-hmm. And for the past 6 months, this guy has been paying hospital bills and supporting her family, and it's a very bad, negative example of Thai people that I don't like to bring up as an example from the books, but as an example of something wild that happened in one of my books, I would cite that. And I've used that story. I've used it as a ploy, a comedic ploy that didn't actually turn out the way it did with this guy. Of attempts to wheedle money out of a expat.
Okay.
But on the whole, I have to say my Thai characters come off sort of pretty well, I would say.
Okay. Well, that's good. So do you think a tourist could use your books as a guide to Thailand?
No, not as a guide. Not as a guide as to what to do or how to do it, but maybe warning.
Okay.
And maybe inspiration to come and check it out for himself or herself.
Mm-hmm. If you weren't a writer, what would you be doing?
Well, I probably would not be in Thailand. I would probably be somewhere in America with a comfy little house and a nice dog and a nice yard that I have to mow every week. Some cushy, I wouldn't say cushy, I'll say nightmarish office job.
Mm-hmm. What's the most difficult thing about being a writer then?
Oh, the fact that I don't have that nice little house and that little office job, I'd say, is the worst part of it. I do concentrate on my writing probably too much that I ignore the other aspects of my life. But it's been fun. I enjoyed it.
Well, that's good. And so going back to the characters in your books and talking about reality, so are any of the characters in your books based off of you?
No, not so much. Aspects, of course. Aspects of my personality will come out in my characters, I suppose. I did just complete a sort of autobiographical tale of growing up with movies.
Okay.
Sounds a little odd, but it's a story of growing up in the 70s and all the crazy movies that influenced me along the way. Nothing to do with Thailand, just a little side note plug.
Okay, so are you going to do another one of those books kind of about your personal life, or are you going back to the fictional side of it?
No, I'm currently working on another Bangkok Dick novel.
Okay.
My detective. Having some fun with that. And after that, I'm looking at some roads. I don't know which one yet, but...
Another Bangkok or somewhere outside of Bangkok?
Yeah, I haven't decided yet.
Okay. Any other future plans for the books and for you in general?
I've always got some plans. There's always a book I want to write. Just a matter of getting around to doing it. And I've probably started at least a half dozen books that I want to go back to and see if I can hammer something out of those. So yeah, I'll keep on keeping on, I guess.
So are you sticking to the Thailand theme, or you think you'll do something else, maybe another country?
Probably stay more Thai-oriented. Branching out in different areas. I can't seem to get away from the comedy, but I would like to try to do an authentic horror novel in Thailand.